You are now listening to the Unscripted Ohio podcast, brought to you by Buckeye Grove and in part by JFQ Lending. All your home purchase and refinance needs should be handled by a Buckeye. You'll never pay for your appraisal with these guys. Licensed in 33 states and more on the way. Check them out at jfqlending.com. For the latest news, notes, analysis, and discussion, check us out on buckeyegrove.com and follow us on Twitter at UnscriptedOhio1. Now, broadcasting from Podcast Central, a place that is not his mother's basement.
Hey, Mom! Can we get some meatloaf?
We promise. Here's your host, Kyle Lamb.
Hey, Mom! The meatloaf!
It's Friday. We're back here on Unscripted Ohio, and as I told you Wednesday, Ohio State is playing Miami this week, but I'm not going to feign interest on this. I'm not going to spend a lot of time analyzing it. I'm not even going to have our weekly game day preview. I usually try to preview the opponent with a beat writer that covers the team. I'm not going to do that this week because, honestly, it's a 37-point spread. What's the point? I'm not saying Miami can't play with Ohio State on Saturday. Maybe they will. Maybe it's a lot closer than I'm expecting. If that happens, we will have plenty to talk about next week. But for right now, I'm going to hold that off. I'm your host, Kyle Lamb. We are here by BuckeyeGrove.com, as well as our title sponsor, JFQ Lending. All of your mortgage and refinance needs should be handled by a Buckeye. Please check them out at jfqlending.com. And we are also here with support from GoBus, with over 40 stops across Ohio with popular destinations like Hocking Hills, Mohican State Park, and Ohio's big cities. Visit them at ridegobus.com or call them 888-95-GO-BUS. So, instead of spending a lot of time on Miami, we're going to have kind of a hodgepodge of topics today. We're going to talk about Ohio State. We're going to talk some Ohio State football recruiting, some Ohio State basketball recruiting, maybe a commitment coming up for Ohio State basketball this weekend. We'll talk about what that means. And also, I've got Corey Evans of Rivals.com, national recruiting analyst, coming up here later in the show. He will tell you about Eugene Brown III, Ohio State's 2020 commitment from last week, and we will talk more about that potential commitment I just teased. But with me to talk about all of these variety of topics is Buckeye Grove's own Alex Gleitman. Alex, thank you for joining me. It's been a few weeks. Glad you could make it back on the show.
Hey, Kyle. Thanks for having me on. Always a pleasure, and love talking some Buckeyes hoops and football with you.
Yes, it's a pleasure, and I'm glad you were willing to wait patiently through that long intro. But so, hey, man, I'm going to get right into it. Miami and Ohio State coming up Saturday. We'll do our token couple minutes on this subject. So this Miami team, let's be honest, they already are not a big talent comparison to Ohio State. They did play Iowa early in the year and played a competitive game. They were competitive through about a quarter and a half against Cincinnati when the Bearcats finally pulled away. But now Miami, not only do they have that talent discrepancy, but they're really banged up on the offensive line. I think I heard that they've got, potentially 3 starters out for this week against Ohio State. So Ohio State really just needs to go in and just keep doing what they're doing, I think, right? You can't there's no reason to expect a fight from here, but just keep working on the little things and growing with the fundamentals and the reads and not turning the ball over and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's not going to be pretty for Miami, I don't think. Obviously, Ohio State has a kind of a pretty big game hanging over their heads in a couple weeks at Lincoln, Nebraska, which was just recently announced this week as a night game. So their minds could be toward that a little. But even with that in mind, I think this is going to be a complete blowout. Ohio State, I saw the line this morning, was up to something like 39 points, close to 40 points. It opened at 37. So I actually expect Ohio State to cover that. And I normally wouldn't say that with a spread that high because you never know what happens when you put the backups in. But as you said, there's some guys injured. They'll probably anyone who's questionable, they'll probably kind of hold out to try to go ahead and then keep them healthy for MAC season where it really matters for them. This game is obviously, there's a lot of Ohio kids playing for Miami, and they're going to want to show out their best in the horseshoe, and they're going to want to bring their A game. And who knows, MAC teams have beaten Power 5 teams before, but I think the talent gap is too wide, even between the second stringers on Ohio State and Miami starters. And so, end of the day, I just see this being kind of a blowout from whistle to whistle, and I think Ohio State's going to win pretty big.
I love their coach's response when asked about that talent difference, because he basically said, "Yeah, it's like, being on a playground and having the first 85 picks." And his quote kind of reminded me of something you would hear from Charlie Coles when Coles was the basketball coach there. That's the type of personality I come to expect. But that's so true. It's just kind of funny to hear it. I know some people were kind of criticizing that comment, saying, "Well, that's a bad look for his team and everything." But I think he probably has a handle on the personality of his team.
Yeah, I mean, I think he was cracking a joke to some extent, similar to when Lane Kiffin, before the first game, kind of was like, "Well, I don't make the schedule. Like, you think I would schedule Ohio State if I made the schedule?" I mean, listen, these guys know what they're getting into. Obviously, the coach, Chuck Martin, is going to do everything he can to get his guys ready to go out, battle, and win that football game. I think, though, number one, he has a grasp on reality. Obviously, their chances are pretty slim. I would call it maybe 1 or 2% chance that they're going to win the football game, right? And then I think, secondly, it's a little bit of a reverse psychology situation, as Nevada kind of said on the site, in the sense that, you're motivating your guys a little bit more by throwing a comment out like that, like, "Hey, coach, we're going to show you, like, we're not number 86 through, whatever it is, 170 or whatnot. Like, we could play with these guys." So, I as you said, I think he's got a pretty good grasp on the personality of his team, and I think he's just having a little fun with obviously what is a big challenge ahead for the Redhawks.
I kind of tossed this question out at Ross, and I've had conversations with Corey about it, and Johnny and myself at the past couple shows, but I also want to get your take. What have you seen from Ohio State through the first 3 games that would lead you to believe that they need to work on X? Is there anything that jumps out, even in the slightest, that you think could be a potential problem later down the road, or that you just need to see a little bit more of before you'll say that this is legit?
Yeah, I mean, I think across the board, you always want to improve, get better, gel, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The one thing I've been beating the drum on is the kicking game, both when it comes to kickoffs and field goals. It's just crazy to me that, as long as, think about, like, and it even goes way before this, but, like, the Jim Tressel era, from 2001 all the way, through the end, 2010, kicking was never a problem for Ohio State. It was always solid defense, great run game, great special teams, including some really, really good kickers. Ever since, I would say, Drew Basil left Ohio State, what was that, after the 2012 season, maybe, right, 2013 perhaps, it seems Ohio State can't find a consistent kicker. And Blake Haubeil was the number 1 kicker in the country. He's kind of had, last year, was a tough year with Sean Nurnberger getting hurt and him coming in. I think he did a fine job. They didn't attempt too many long field goals. This year in the first game, he hit one in the opener, but he missed a 32-yarder last week against Indiana when the game was still in hand. And, against Indiana, that's fine. They went on to win 51-10. But what if that's against Nebraska in Lincoln in a couple weeks, and that 3 points could be the difference between Ohio State winning and losing the football game? You got to be able to hit a 32-yarder in college. Anything 40 and under, your kicker should be automatic. Anything 40 and over in college, I understand there being a little bit more room versus the NFL. So that's one area. And then kickoffs, I understand what Ohio State tries to do. They try to kick it high and in the corner and get people to return the football and pin them inside the 25, which is where they would get it if it was a touchback or they kneel it or whatever it may be. But they are not executing that consistently. I remember a few games ago, he kicked one out of bounds. It seems like some hang times are too high, some hang times are too low. Fortunately, the coverage has been pretty good, but there's been a couple kicks where I know Haubeil had to save one. There was a couple last week that were saved by a shoestring tackle. So I think as long as, the kicking game isn't solidified, that's something that could cost Ohio State a game later on in the year.
Yeah, Alex, it's fascinating because if you think about it, Ohio State's punting has been superb for really the last 20 years. I don't think there's more than one punter in there that didn't do a really, really good job. And like you said, kickers, too, for most of those same 20 years have been really good. But the last 5-6 years, they have kind of dropped off. And it's funny how, how spoiled you are with kicking. You take it for granted when you have it for so long. And then all of a sudden when you don't have it, it's like, oh, yeah, this is an actual real specialty, a skill that this team is lacking. And you don't notice it until you don't have it.
Yeah, absolutely. As you said, Drew Crispin's been great. The return game, I mean, obviously, that also hasn't been outstanding, really, ever since Ted Ginn left. But it's been okay. I mean, they haven't been turning the ball over. the return yardage has been decent. You have to be satisfied with that. And then, the coverage has been fairly good overall. It's just that kicking game really needs to get going. They really need to get consistency out of Blake Haubeil. They need him to build confidence and be able to use the leg. Like, physically, there's no problems there. It's kicking's, probably 90% mental, 10% physical. So, they got to get him to come along and be more consistent, both on kickoffs and field goals. As you said, like, if they could get that down and it's something you don't have to worry about, yeah, you take it for granted, but you'd much rather be in that position than the position I'm feeling right now for Ohio State in the kicking game.
You mentioned the returns. That's actually something I was thinking about this past weekend. It seems to me that Demario McCall is definitely the high ceiling returner that they have, but on punt returns, they haven't committed to him yet, and they've still kind of waffled back and forth between him and KJ Hill. Do you make anything of that? Are they still worried about his fumbles throughout practice and he just hasn't held on to the ball, or is there something else there that they can't decide, hey, McCall is our guy? Because he does seem to be such a big play potential returner from what we saw, especially in game one, but they just haven't made that commitment yet.
Yeah, it's probably a combination. Number one, KJ Hill, normally he's dropped actually a couple passes this year, but he's extremely sure-handed. So, having a guy in big games where you're just get the ball, catch it, maybe you get, 5 return yards, maybe you don't have the big play potential, but sometimes you just want to play it safe. I think it's getting him reps. And I think that's important because you may want to use him in some games. I think with McCall, you're right. I mean, he definitely has the higher ceiling. I've expected a little bit more wiggle and explosion than what we've seen from him, quite honestly. And I he's had some decent returns, but I just expect a little more. I want to correct myself. It's probably been since Jalen Marshall that they haven't had a really, really good returner. Obviously, he had his follies, fumble problems and things like that, but he was a really good returner. And so since that 2014 season, they really haven't had, or 2015 year, they really haven't had an elite return guy. And Demario definitely has that potential, but I don't think he's shown them enough as far as his production. And then, as you mentioned, there were some fumble issues and some poor decision-making last year. It seems like that's improved a little bit, but I think, they want to get both guys reps, depending on the situation, who they want to use. Do they want to try to take more of a risk and go for a big return with McCall, or do they want to be a little bit more sure-handed with KJ Hill? And then the other guy to look at late in the games, they've been putting Garrett Wilson back there. He hasn't really had a chance to return many punts, but he is a guy to watch. He's obviously an explosive athlete who they've tried to rotate in, and he's a true freshman, but he's a game-breaking type of talent. So, he's a guy who potentially could get in the mix if McCall and Hill aren't giving them what they're looking for.
And Alex, on the offensive side of the ball, one of the things that has really shown itself, especially the last 2 games, the first week was a little iffy, rough around the edges, but the last 2 games, the Ohio State run game, both the offensive line blocking up front, just, massively blowing open holes up front there for J.K. Dobbins, and Dobbins finding the second level of the defense and making some big runs. And of course, Master Teague, I can't forget him as well, because he's really looking like a capable second back that's going to get a lot of carries this year. But those 3 things added together, right now at least, it looks like Ohio State has a potential run game that's going to click the rest of the year. At least it seems that way.
Yeah, you got to love what you're seeing, but at the same time, and this is how I feel about Justin Fields too, you love what you're seeing right now. Everything is how it's supposed to be going, but and no disrespect to Cincinnati, who I think is going to have a pretty good year once again. No disrespect to Florida Atlantic, who is expected to make a bowl game and potentially be a dark horse for their conference. And then no disrespect to Indiana, who's, going to definitely be in contention for a bowl game and traditionally gives teams like Ohio State or Michigan or whatnot some issues year after year as far as playing close games against them. But that's not like playing Nebraska and Lincoln. That's not coming back the next week and playing Michigan State or going to Northwestern or playing Wisconsin or playing Penn State or going to Ann Arbor. So I think the running game is where you want it to be. It's great that they're able to build depth. It's great that they're having success early. It's going to build confidence in everyone involved. But until we see all of these elements on the team, both offense and defense, against some better competition and tougher challenges, and put them in situations where they have to make some big plays when the game is on the line. We just haven't seen that yet. So I'm going to hold judgment until then, but you got to like what you're seeing so far.
I think I saw a crazy stat too. Out of the 15 top rush defenses in the country, I think 5 of them are from the Big Ten. So it just underscores that Ohio State is going to be facing some really good defenses. Michigan State, Wisconsin, Michigan, Iowa. Although they don't play Ohio State this year, Iowa's got a really good rush defense. It's just there are a lot of really, really good opponents that Ohio State may see this year. So the competition is most certainly going to step up.
Yeah, and the other thing to point out though is one thing that's really kind of driving a lot of, not driving a lot of success, but contributing to the success is Justin Fields as a running threat. Obviously, Ohio State has kind of held him back a little bit in these early games. Make sure he stays healthy. They might unleash him a little bit when they need to use him against some of those more difficult defenses that you mentioned. But having a defender needing to account for Justin Fields as a runner has certainly helped the offensive line, has certainly helped J.K. Dobbins, and as good as Dwayne Haskins was throwing the football last year, that is not an element he brought to the table. Nobody took him running as a serious threat whatsoever, and so everyone was able to focus on the running back. And teams like Wisconsin that are great downhill teams in stopping the run, and same with Michigan State, it's not going to be as easy for them against Ohio State because they are going to have to account for Fields, which I think is something that's been a little bit overlooked early on in the year.
So, Alex, I want to ask you a couple questions about Ohio State football, and then we'll talk about a few basketball-related items. So, first, I know Ohio State is still – they've got Elias Ricks coming on campus later this fall. They're still chasing and pursuing a running back. But relatively speaking, because most of the class is filled up, it's kind of quiet. Are there any names out there that Ohio State is still chasing that you think needs brought to Ohio State fans' attention and guys to keep an eye on here the rest of the fall?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll start with a visitor this weekend that's expected. And, with recruiting, everything's fluid. Just because a visitor is expected, the kid says he's coming, the school confirms they're expecting him. It doesn't mean he's going to show up on campus. But news we broke, I believe it was Monday, either late Sunday or early Monday, I forget. I put up a story on the site after speaking to cornerback Ryan Watts from down in Texas. He's actually committed to Oklahoma right now, but he's supposed to take an official visit to Ohio State this weekend. And he's a defensive back that Ohio State has been pursuing for a long, long time. Jeff Hafley, Matt Barnes, Greg Madison, all those guys have kind of been, and of course Ryan Day have all been contributing to the efforts behind getting Ryan Watts and Kevin Wilson, who does a great job in Texas, will be involved as well. But getting Ryan Watts comfortable with Ohio State, building a relationship, and now getting him up to campus and showing him, why Ohio State potentially could be a better fit for him than Oklahoma. So that's a name that fans need to watch right here, right now. This weekend is going to be really big in determining how that one goes. We'll obviously have as much intel as we can on the site following his visit, but he's definitely one name you got to watch. And then, as you said, 2 running backs I think Ohio State wants to get. I think they'd love to get a second quarterback. I think they'd love to get a defensive back, maybe 2. And then I think they need to add a couple of defensive linemen. To me, running back's the most important. I expect J.K. Dobbins to leave after this year. Right now, it looks like Steel Chambers probably going to stay at running back, but his ability to play linebacker and I think do it at a really high level is going to be interesting in the future. So I think they need to definitely get 1 back, if not 2. And so Kevontre Bradford, another Texas kid, a running back, is going to be making an official visit in a couple weeks for the Michigan State game. He's absolutely a name you need to watch. In my A deck this week, I talked about watching not who the offers go out to, not who Ohio State has been in contact to at running back, but are the official visits happening and when are they happening? And Kevontre Bradford's official visit is happening first out of all the running back targets that are currently on the board, and it's definitely going to happen. So right now I would call Wisconsin the biggest threat to Ohio State. I think an LSU offer that came in recently is something to watch as well. But I think right now all things are trending toward Bradford being at least one of 2 Ohio State running backs in the class. But that's definitely something to watch over the next few weeks.
Alex, in addition to those running back targets you just mentioned, I want to ask this follow-up question. I usually try to filter these types of questions out, but so I apologize if this is crazy out there, but somebody did ask me, and so I wanted to make it a point to ask you, knowing you were going to be on. Somebody mentioned there was a rumor that Jalen Knighton had reached out to Ohio State and is showing interest. And I don't know if that's just conjecture based on, well, Florida State's season is going really poorly, so maybe he's having second thoughts, or if that's just a crazy rumor that's not true. But is there any element of truth to that with Ohio State trying to spark interest with Knighton again?
I'm not sure if he's reached out to them and seen if, the door's still open for him. What I will say is when Ohio State was recruiting Jalen Knighton and thought they were going to get him, they knew that was going to be a recruiting battle, that even if they got his commitment in July, it wasn't going to end until he signed pen to ink in December at the early signing period. So it's not surprising to me at all if that is indeed true, just because, number one, as you said, Florida State's not having a great year. Number two, all sides, Ohio State, Florida State, anyone else involved, felt that recruitment was going to be one that goes down to signing day, no matter who got his commitment in July. So I fully expected, even when he committed to Florida State, and Bijan Robinson didn't announce yet that Ohio State would be chasing Jalen Knighton all the way until he signs with a different school or them. And I still expect that to be the situation today. I think, you're looking at a pool of every single running back in the country, whether they're committed somewhere, whether they're not committed somewhere, whether Ohio State previously passed on them in the evaluation. They're going to be looking at every single target, trying to get the two best running backs in America to sign with them come December or February. So I fully expect Jalen Knighton to be a name that continues to be on the board, and I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up certainly, especially if Florida State season continues to go as planned, with Willie Taggart's future in jeopardy, whether that be them firing him after this year or giving him one more year and him being on the extremely hot seat, which I could see as a likely scenario. I could see Knighton taking a more sure situation with Ohio State, a school that he really liked and was actually silently committed to before publicly committing to Florida State at the end of July.
Yeah, let's be honest. It might be a coin flip if Willie Taggart is even the head coach come December 1 there at Florida State. It's going to be interesting to watch that season play out. So basketball-wise, I mentioned there's a good chance Zed Key, a 6'8" forward, might be committing to Ohio State. He's got a commitment scheduled for Sunday at 2 p.m. They also have Zach Loveday on campus this week. I know you, Alex, have said you're expecting a commitment from Ohio State. I know I've said that. Corey Evans, who I've got coming up here in a little bit, he is pretty outspoken about that as well. So in your mind, because I posed this question to Corey, and I'm kind of curious your take. In your mind, if Ohio State does get that commitment from Zed Key, would they still take a commitment from Zach Loveday, knowing he's going to be on campus potentially when that happens, which I think is an interesting dynamic?
Yeah, it's a really tough scenario. I do expect Ohio State to land Zed Key pending any sort of late change on either side. I don't see Ohio State shifting off their stance, and with Zed Key scheduling his announcement for Sunday at 2 p.m. Eastern, I don't see him kind of moving off that stance of wanting to be a Buckeye. The way I saw it, Ohio State technically has one spot in the 2020 class. Right. It seems pretty clear that either someone's going to leave, Kalen Weston's going to go pro, someone's going to transfer, et cetera, et cetera. They are going to be able to free up another scholarship for a big. They wanted like a shooter or wing in Eugene Brown, and then get a big in what looks like to be Zed Key. An in-state 7-footer and Zach Loveday, especially if you're going to lose Caleb Wesson, that would mean that they need to clear another additional spot. Certainly possible. You don't have to look far. The roster's obviously loaded with wing type of players, and it wouldn't be surprising if one of those guys decided to move on and get more playing time elsewhere. I'm not going to speculate on names. You guys could do that. And I'm not even, I'm just kind of guessing here based on looking at the scenario, but they are going to have to open up multiple spots to be able to fill more players. So I could see right now, I think the most likely scenario is they obviously have Brown, they get Zed Key, and then I think Zach Loveday goes elsewhere. But maybe they have something up their sleeves that I don't know about. Maybe Zach Loveday doesn't even make the visit this weekend. Maybe Ohio State calls it off knowing that they're going to get Key. That certainly it could be a scenario. So I think you have to watch, does Zach Loveday even make it to campus this weekend? And if he does, what does that mean, pending that all of our thoughts about Zed Key turn out to be true and he does commit to Ohio State on Sunday?
Alex, it's really interesting watching Ohio State because I am really impressed. I've been covering Ohio State basketball and recruiting since 2003, so it's been 16 years for me. I've seen, obviously, the success that Thad Matta had. One thing I'm seeing now from Ohio State that I have not seen before is tremendous recruiting depth. Thad Matta brought in, obviously, the McDonald's guys, some five-star guys. He brought in a lot of successful talent, but they kind of missed the boat on some of the the filler guys and the guys at the end of the bench, I think they didn't develop some of those guys very well and maybe missed on a few. And so the depth wasn't always there. But that's something I think that Chris Holtmann so far and his staff seem to be doing a really good job building. And I know this conversation came up on the Horseshoe Lounge on Buckeye Grove. So there are some asking, well, it seems like the only thing missing maybe is the abundance of those five-star guys that can compete for a national title. Alex, I'm curious on your thoughts on this, because I would assess college basketball right now as being kind of in an interesting spot, in that the previous formula of winning with NBA first-round talents doesn't seem to be working as well or as consistently right now. You just saw a Virginia program win the national title against a Texas Tech program that really neither team had top 25 players on the entire roster. Now, they do have guys that are going to wind up being really good NBA players, so maybe that's not a fair assessment, but they weren't big-time recruits coming out of college, which just tells me if you have a coach that can identify talent, bring it in and develop it, and you have a good starting lineup with a deep roster, I think you can be really successful in this day and age.
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, if you gave Tony Bennett the choice to take before the season Duke's roster or his roster, as coming out of high school, what would he pick? I don't think there's no one who would believe that he would pick his roster as far as where the guys were ranked coming out of high school. That said, I think there's multiple elements. I think, as you said, it's identifying talent. I think it's system fit. I think that's really, really important. Is, do these guys fit in the system? Do they fit together? Can they work together to make, your system successful? And then it's development. I think that's really, really key. I think you get the guys on campus and you have to develop them. All these guys who are signing Division I basketball scholarships that are ranked in the top 100, 150, 200 have the potential to be NBA type of players, right? They're really, really good basketball players. 200 of the best basketball players in the world. There's probably very little difference between recruit number 121 and recruit 77. But how do you develop those guys? And again, and it also goes back to the other thing, is recruit 77 may be a better basketball player one-on-one, but recruit 121 might fit into your needs or fit into what you're trying to do better. So I think there's a lot of factors involved here, and I think there's two different formulas. Everyone would love to have Zion Williamson and RJ Barrett, and obviously Duke was really good this year and went far in the tournament because of those guys. But it seems like Chris Holtmann at Butler, his formula was kind of build a team that fits his system, a group of veterans. Veterans always do well in the NCAA tournament. Everyone wants veterans, and they want really good point guards. And so I think Ohio State has that, and they're building that. I think the key for Ohio State is building that foundation with veterans who fit within Chris Holtmann's system, and then adding some elite talent along the way. So, just like Thad Matta did, Thad Matta had a lot of program guys, system guys, but then you add in, obviously, the Greg Odens, Mike Conleys, you add in the Evan Turner type of players, you add in the D'Angelo Russells, and it could take a really good team to a great team. And I think that's got to be the formula for Ohio State moving forward.
I think you hit on a key point, Alex, because I've said very frequently in the past, I think there's a bigger difference between 1 to 30 than there is from 30 to 100. So if you get, there's not a big difference between if you've got the 57th guy or the 100th guy, there's not really a big difference. I think the biggest deal is for the coach to be able to develop the guy on campus. And not just that, but like you said, are they a system guy, and can you maximize the strengths and minimize the weaknesses when you're actually coaching on game day against an opponent and putting your players in a position to succeed. I think that really is the key, and I think that separates the good coaches from the great coaches.
Yeah, and I think, it's a little too early to tell if Chris Holtmann is a great coach, but I think he's done a great job of that through his first couple of years at Ohio State. He's put his guys in position to win. He's managed the games really well. He's, to me, exceeded expectations in both Season 1 and Season 2. And now this year he's going to have a team that has a lot of veterans on it. For the first time, probably since D'Angelo Russell, has a real point guard. Obviously, I personally think this team will be as good as DJ Carden is good. If he's a superstar, this team is going to be really, really good. If he's just a good player, they're going to be good again. I don't know if they're going to be great, but I think this year and next year, the following year, will really tell us, is Chris Holtmann a good coach to really good coach, or is he a great coach? And I think we'll find that out, with the teams and the rosters he has over the next two seasons.
I agree completely. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch Ohio State basketball this year. If nothing else, they are going to be entertaining. They're going to be talented. Will they win the Big Ten? Well, how far would they go in the NCAA tournament if they make it? Those are questions we'll have to answer later, but it will be a fun season to watch. If for no other reason, man, that non-conference schedule sure is brutal. So it'll be fun to watch those games early on. Alex, I really appreciate you coming on this week. We'll get you on here more regularly going forward. It's going to be a lot of fun. We've got a lot of momentum going here on Unscripted Ohio, so it should be a lot of fun getting to build this with you.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Super excited to start making more appearances regularly on here, and it's going to be fun to watch both Buckeyes football and the start of Buckeyes basketball over the next few months.
Catch him on Twitter at Alex Gleitman. Read the A-Deck, his column over on Buckeye Grove, and all of his great work over there.
Stretch runtime here at Unscripted Ohio. Kick up your feet as we cross the finish line with the Buckeye Beat, the latest in Ohio State news and notes.
Kick the tires and light the fires, Big Daddy.
All right, Corey Evans, national recruiting analyst for Rivals.com, is with me. Corey's been on the show a few times. Corey, it's been a hot minute. Appreciate you coming back on the show.
No, most definitely. Thank you for having me back on there.
So let's start with, let's go back to last week. Ohio State picked up a commitment from a 2020 kid, Eugene Brown III, out of Decatur, Georgia. First, tell me a little bit about him and what kind of kid that Ohio State is getting with that commitment.
As a kid, phenomenal kid. He's the son of his high school coach. So, it's definitely in his bloodlines. He's well coached. Has so many of the intangibles. They beat out Georgia Tech, Clemson, Texas A&M, Butler for his commitment. So definitely a very, very solid commitment. I love what he could become. 6'6", long, rangy, but most of all can really shoot the basketball. The one dilemma is his durability. Had a really bad broken leg last December, where I believe he had to have a rod put through his leg for a moment in time. So it definitely kind of curtailed his development path in a way. Didn't play a lot of travel basketball, just now getting healthy and all that stuff. But wrapping it all back around, I mean, what he could be, his potential is one of the better wing prospects in the class nationally.
You mentioned, obviously, he is known right now for being a shooter, and that's kind of his go-to on offense. It's been said that the biggest thing he needs to work on is his ball handling. Where is he at right now in that part of his development, and how much further you think down the road does he need to get before he can be relied on as a consistent scorer?
Yeah, he's not all there yet from a primary or secondary ball handling role. But I think in due time he can. He's more of a 2-3 dribble kind of guy, but he has a very, very good feel and awareness for the game. So he can definitely pass the ball appropriately in the half-court setting, but he's more of a 2 dribble and shot kind of guy. He's not much of a 2-3-4 dribble shot creator or playmaker. But in due time, like I said, I think he can become that multifaceted wing kind of guy.
Corey, tell me about his defense. I've tried my best to look at the defensive side of the ball, and that's hard to do just looking at clips and videos online. I have seen him. It looks like he's a really good shot blocker for his position, but I've not been able to ascertain his defense. But he's said to be a really good defender. Tell me what his defensive potential is.
Yeah, I think he could become that 3-and-D kind of guy. The valuable 3-and-D guy that can guard different spots, and like you said, make shots. He's long, he's agile, he has very, very good instincts. It's all going to come back to being how physical, how strong can he be to withstand physicality. Can he withstand the bumps of the offensive player? But I think he can definitely sit down and guard both wing spots, and like you said, also kind of be a perimeter shot blocker, which adds even more value to what he could be.
Corey, there's an interesting situation coming up for Ohio State this weekend because they are scheduled to host Zach Loveday on a visit, and at the same time, Zed Key is planning to announce his college decision, I believe Sunday afternoon, if that's accurate. And Ohio State is thought to be, if not a front runner, definitely one of the favorites and a really good chance to land him. So how do you see that situation playing out? Do you see Ohio State landing Key? And if so, what happens with the Loveday visit?
Yeah, as of now, like you said, Loveday is still planning on visiting Ohio State. I think Baylor is the school to beat going in. He visited Baylor twice in the past 6 months officially. I think Ohio State, despite only having one scholarship to give, would potentially oversign with the chance of Caleb Westman leaving after this season early. I think they could definitely take both Zach and Zed Key. I would be surprised if Zed Key does not commit to Ohio State on Sunday at 2 o'clock. Where that leaves Loveday, I think they wouldn't take him on campus not knowing that Zed's going to commit and still not take Zach's commitment if he felt like Ohio State was where it was meant to be. I do believe Zach will commit the next 10 days or so. I think he's already done with all of his scheduled visits after this weekend. He visited Louisville 2 weeks ago and Baylor last week. But as if Zed does not commit to Ohio State, and if he does not, I would be very surprised if they don't land Zach Loveday.
Zed is obviously a very big physical kid. What kind of ceiling do you see for him in college at the next level?
He really reminds me of Bonzie Colson. I think that he has the same tangibles of a Bonzie Colson. Undersized, maybe 6'6", 6'7", but long arms. When Bonzie came to Notre Dame, he wasn't that really skilled shot-making kind of big man. He was a below-bucket, hard-playing rebounder with a good feel and good IQ for the game, and kind of developed that 20-foot in game. And I think Zed can kind of follow a similar path as Bonzie.
I kind of find it fascinating with Ohio State's approach here, because it seems like they really like those undersized fours, the tough-minded approach with those guys, and they're not true post players, but they can play in the post and do a lot of rebounding in the garbage work, and that seems like the direction Ohio State seems to be trending with Light and now going after Zed Key as well.
Yeah, I think Coach Holtman's really intrigued by, like you said, versatility maybe with that length, and just so many moving parts to have. I mean, you throw a guy like Zed next to, Alonzo Gaffney and E.J. Liddell, that's a pretty interesting, intriguing, versatile front court, that's for sure. Guys that can do so many things offensively, but also defensively.
Corey, with one spot remaining, and there was a report this week, even after Brown committed to Ohio State, that they were still pursuing a visit with Scotty Barnes. I believe it was an in-home, if I remember correctly. Is that something they're still pursuing just to see how things shake out, or was that something that was planned before the commitment and probably not going forward now?
Yeah, if both Zach and, Zed decide to commit to Ohio State, taking one over the limit is pushing it. Taking two, even for how good Scotty would be, is really pushing it. I think they wouldn't mind having a guy like Scotty on campus, right? I mean, he's top 10 player in America. They're definitely playing catch up there, but I think, I do think if Zed were to commit, they would still keep pursuing there, especially with Scotty likely to commit maybe during the late signing period in the spring. But let's say Zach and Zed both come on board, those chances there are very, very, very slim.
He is Corey Evans. Check him out on Rivals.com. Corey, appreciate the update, and hopefully it won't be as long as the last. Next time we'll get you on the show, but I appreciate your work, buddy.
Thanks so much for having me on board here.
So let's wrap the show up here in the waning moments of the final segment with a little Michigan-Wisconsin talk. I have been very, very excited for this game for a couple weeks, and It's actually one of the games in the early season that I really most look forward to, especially on the heels of the opening 2-week performances of the Wisconsin Badgers, who right now look like a very complete football team. We knew that the run game with Jonathan Taylor and that offensive line was going to be really good. Taylor may be the best running back in the country. If he's not, he's certainly one of the top 2 or 3. The Wisconsin defense was expected to be stout this year. They were a little inconsistent when they were needed the most last year, but they were a good defense, and their front seven really looks good right now. They are playing the run as well as they've played the last couple years. It's a really good-looking team, and Jack Cohn has been a fantastic quarterback. He's been nearly flawless. They've outscored their opponents something like 130-0 in the first 2 games. But buyer beware with Wisconsin, just because if you think back to a few years ago when Alex Hornibrook made his debut, the first couple games he looked really good as well, and he wound up getting run out of town, transferred out, was no longer the quarterback there. So the first couple games can be deceiving, especially against lesser opponents, and I take that into consideration with Wisconsin, but they do look like a really complete football team. And in a conference right now, the Big Ten, where there have been so many disappointing offenses, Michigan State, Michigan has been very disappointing. Penn State looked great the first couple of games against bad opponents, but then against Pittsburgh, they looked blah. So there have been some very mediocre offensive performances in this league, but Wisconsin looks like the exception. So I have been really looking forward to this Michigan-Wisconsin showdown because I think it's a fantastic game on paper. Michigan has not looked the part. Their offense looks out of sync. It looks out of rhythm. I think there's a culture problem there at Michigan. It's not that they don't have talent. I don't think that they're as deep. They don't have the upper-level 5-star players that Ohio State has, and they don't have the depth that Ohio State has. But if you just look at the 2 deep and compare them, there's not a lot of differences there. But Michigan is out of sync on offense. But I really wanted to see this game, and that leads me into what I'm going to talk about next. It doesn't make sense why I would be celebrating or wishing an injury to Michigan. Zach Charbonnet, their true freshman running back, looks solid, not spectacular. I am not on board with the hype of Charbonnet like some Michigan fans are. I think Michigan fans, to be fair, have not seen a lot of quality running back play the last several years at Michigan. So they get this freshman kid who runs hard, is a great blocker, does some of the little things. He's an exciting runner. Not a big-time playmaker, but he's an exciting runner because he does run hard. And for that reason, I completely get why Michigan fans would be excited about this kid. I don't think he has the big play potential, the big play ability that you're going to see from some of the better running backs in the country, but I think he can be a future workhorse. But because I want to see this matchup so much, I don't want to see this kid injured. I want to see him out there against Wisconsin on Saturday. It does not behoove me to go out here and make crap up and just throw it against the wall. You may think I'm an Ohio State homer. You may think that I'm an Ohio State blogger or podcaster and don't care about anything and just want to have a joke and have a laugh at Michigan's expense. But I got news for you. I don't care about any of that. And I put this out there 2 days ago. I tweeted about this. I tweeted on my Twitter, at KYLAM8, okay? I said that I'm hearing Zach Charbonnet may miss a couple of weeks. He's supposed to have surgery. A second scope is what I said. I said he is supposed to have, remember he had arthroscopic knee surgery to repair meniscus. That was back in the spring. That was a pre-existing injury from his high school days. What I originally tweeted was that he was supposed to have a follow-up, that it wasn't done correctly the first time, and he may still have some damage from that. As it turns out, he's actually got 2 injuries, okay? I put this out there. He may need another surgery to repair a pre-existing injury. He didn't get hurt in the last 2 weeks. He had a pre-existing injury, and he may miss a couple of weeks for Michigan. Now, it was kind of implied that the surgery would be done, and they would probably sit him out this week against Wisconsin. Let me state for the record that, yes, there is a chance he could play against Wisconsin tomorrow. But I am also going to tell you this. I am not backing down from this report. I am 100% sure of what I reported. Zach Charbonnet does have a pre-existing injury. He played in the Middle Tennessee and Army games with this injury already. He may have aggravated it further. There were two separate issues, one that caused the procedure in the spring and another that he did not have a procedure on. I am not sure the details on that second injury. All I can tell you is there were two separate injuries. That's what I've been told. But he absolutely is injured right now. And I posted this almost 48 hours ago, okay? And there is not a single Michigan reporter, blogger, university, the university PR team, there is not a single person that has come out and absolutely said, yeah, that tweet by that Ohio State blogger, that Ohio State reporter, is false. Nobody has come out and said that. They've tried to deflect. They've tried to pick apart little pieces of things that I have not said, but nobody has come out and said anything. And you may say, well, why would they respond to every single rumor out there? Why would they respond to a rumor by the Ohio State blogger? That's what they're calling me, and out there in Michigan webosphere, okay? They're calling me the OSU blogger. Well, I will tell you this. They clearly thought it was enough to respond to, credible enough to respond to, because it lit up their airways, it lit up their websites, the social media. They were all talking about it. So clearly, they addressed it. My tweet was everywhere. They were talking about it on Michigan radio. If you're going to talk about it, by the way, at least source it. At least give me the source of this tweet, okay? But anyhow, they were clearly talking about it. So if they're talking about it, then it was credible enough to discuss. And what they haven't done is they haven't said it's wrong. John Jansen, former Michigan player, analyst, and he's on Sirius XM radio, apparently said, well, I can confirm that the surgery has not occurred. Okay, well, I never said a surgery had occurred. I said one is necessary. One is needed in the future, or future tense. He has said, well, as of yesterday, I saw him walking around in Schembechler Hall, and he looked like he was walking without crutches. Okay, great. Many, many athletes have had surgeries on their legs and didn't require crutches before the surgery. So tell me something we don't know. He also goes on to say he expects Charbonnet to play against Wisconsin on Saturday. Okay, maybe that's true. But you notice all of these denials from Jansen and other people, they have not addressed, number one, is there an injury? They haven't actually said there is no injury. They said, well, he's walking around fine. Okay, great. That doesn't mean he's not injured. They haven't said that surgery might not be necessary in the future. You know, you can say, well, the surgery hasn't happened, but does that tell us if surgery is going to be happening? No, look, they are not addressing these particular details, and I stand behind it, and I can tell you that they know these details, at least some of them, are definitely accurate. Even if he plays on Saturday against Wisconsin, it is because they are trying to get him to play through pain. The injury has not gone away. It is still there. It is going to need addressed at some point, whether they kick the can down the road and get surgery mid-season, after the season, what have you. I can tell you Zach Charbonnet is definitely injured. I am standing behind that information. I am standing behind my tweet that he is looking to get surgery. He is in a lot of pain. If he continues to play, it is going to require a lot of pain management. And those details are ones that have not been disputed by anybody. They've tried to deflect. They've tried to discredit me, but they've not come out and said, yeah, that's inaccurate. You shouldn't even listen to any of this. So look, it's not a big deal. I wasn't seeking to be the Michigan insider here and report, be the bearer of bad news and be the boogeyman that brought Michigan to its knees. That wasn't my intent. It was honestly just sort of reacting to what I thought was pretty big news from a source, and it just kind of unraveled quickly, and then I'm like, you know what, I have to be a little bit more respectful here, so I put out the details that I did, and nobody has shot them down, and since then, other people have come forward and told me, yeah, you hit the nail on the head. This is exactly what's happening. Michigan won't admit it, but that is the case. So, look, Zach Charbonnet may or may not play against Wisconsin. Clearly, they want to create a lot of confusion. They want to create a lot of questioning as to the game plan on Saturday and whether or not he will go against the Badgers. He might and he might not, but I will tell you, regardless of whether he plays or doesn't play against Wisconsin, Zach Charbonnet is banged up and does need some attention. And you can fairly, I think, call into question whether or not he should have been carrying the ball 33 times with a pre-existing injury, and especially being a true freshman. And I think that that's why they don't want those details out there. It's not just about hiding the game plan for Wisconsin, although I think that's part of it. But I also think that they don't want second guessing as to whether he should have been playing to begin with. And I'm not going to criticize Michigan for trying to get him to play. If they think he's a star player, he's important to the game plan. And it's not like Michigan is the only program out there doing it. There are other programs that try to get players to play when they're banged up. That's not unusual. Now, whether he should have been out there in this situation, I'm not a doctor. I can't grade and critique that part of this story. But I will tell you, I stand behind Zach Charbonnet is injured. He has a pre-existing injury. This is not something new. I'm standing behind that, and it is what it is. You know, nobody has denied it. Nobody has outright refuted that part of the report. They can say, well, he absolutely has not had surgery. That's not what I said. He's walking around without crutches. Okay, great. That doesn't mean he's not injured. And we think he's going to play tomorrow on Saturday. Okay, well, maybe he will play. That doesn't mean he's not injured. Doesn't mean he doesn't need surgery going forward. We'll see what happens, but I am actually looking forward to this. I hope he does play. I hope he can get through the pain. I hope he plays well. I'm looking forward to a very, very good football game between Wisconsin and Michigan. We'll see what happens, but that is my stance. I wanted to clarify my tweet the other day. As I said, I am standing behind 100% what I said, and I'm not taking it back, and nobody has bothered to refute those particular details. That will wrap it up for the Unscripted Ohio podcast. Catch me on Twitter at KYLam8. Catch the show, Twitter, at UnscriptedOhio1. We are here every Monday through Friday, 7 total shows. I'm here Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Scarlet and Great with Johnny and Corey every Tuesday, Thursday. Chris Drew with the Browns Dog Days podcast every Tuesday, and Shane Larson with Gridiron Game Time here on Unscripted Ohio every Thursday. You can hear our podcasts on many platforms. We release on SoundCloud. We are also on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. Simply find and follow Unscripted Ohio. That's going to do it for me. Hope everybody has a great weekend. We'll be back to break down, dissect Ohio State and Miami, and anything else that happens over the weekend, including the big game up there in Madison, Wisconsin between the Badgers and Wolverines. That's going to do it for me, everybody. Enjoy your weekend.
You can get new episodes of Unscripted Ohio on Mondays and Fridays exclusively at BuckeyeGrove.com or anytime on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on all things Ohio State.